Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something that, well, shapes all of us in really profound ways. The relationship between parent and child. And specifically how our own early experiences can ripple outwards into how we parent.
Yeah, it's huge. And our guide for this exploration is Philippa Perry's book, The Book You Wish Your Parents Had Read, and Your Children Will Be Glad You Did.
That title really says it all, doesn't it?
It really does. And Perry, she gets it.
Yeah.
She acknowledges that parenting is this, incredible mix of intense love and also, let's be honest, the daily grind.
Oh, absolutely. You think about comedians like Michael McIntyre, right?
Yeah.
That whole routine about just getting kids dressed, fed, washed, and into bed.
Exactly. The sheer effort involved in those everyday things. And that's often where the friction happens.
Right. And that's kind of where Perry's book comes in, offering a different lens. Our mission here isn't about finding quick fixes or, tricks to manage kids.
No, it's deeper than that. It's about trying to understand the feelings underneath it all, both theirs and ours.
Connecting on that deeper level, really seeing each other.
Yeah, and what I find compelling is Perry's long view. It's not focused on getting instant obedience today.
It's about building something lasting, right? A relationship.
Exactly. And she gently encourages you to look back at your own childhood, because understanding that is often key to understanding why you react the way you do now.
Makes sense. And the payoff, she suggests.
Hopefully fewer of those exhausting daily battles over, putting coats on or eating vegetables.
And maybe, just maybe, getting to a place where you don't just love your kids, but you actually genuinely like being around them more often than not.
Which is a pretty great goal, I think.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where does Perry start us off?
She begins with something really fundamental, almost obvious when you hear it, but we forget. Children learn by watching us.
Ah, the old do as I say, not as I do problem.
Precisely. She puts it starkly. Children do not do what we say, they do what we do. That's really the foundation, recognizing this parenting legacy we all carry.
How our own upbringing just automatically shapes how we interact with our kids, whether we mean it to or not.
Exactly. We bring our whole history to the table. And Perry points out something interesting, how our kids can sometimes, completely unintentionally, tap into old, unresolved stuff within us.
Like feelings or experiences from way back that we might not even consciously remember.
Yeah. And when that gets triggered, our reaction in the moment might be, well, way bigger than the situation warrants. It's about the old wound, not just the spilled milk.
Oh, I think everyone can relate to that. You overreact to something small and later you're like, whoa, where did that come from?
That's why she really emphasizes understanding our own inner critic, that negative voice inside.
The one telling you you're messing up.
That's the one. It often echoes messages we picked up growing up. And if we're not aware of it, we can end up passing its negativity on, subtly shaping how our kids talk to themselves.
Wow. Okay, so if our past is playing such a big role, what are the core things Perry says children actually need from us?
She lists several essentials. Things like warmth, genuine acceptance, feeling truly okay just as they are.
Not just when they're being good.
Exactly. Also, physical touch, our actual presence, not just being physically there, but mentally checked in. Love, of course, but paired with clean, reliable boundaries.
Okay. What else?
Understanding their world, trying to see things from their perspective, plenty of opportunities for play, ideally with different ages, soothing when they're upset, and our focused attention and time. Seems simple on paper, right?
If only life cooperated, which, as Perry notes, it often doesn't.
Right. She's realistic. She acknowledges the real-world hurdles. Work pressures, childcare juggling, money stress, school demands, just never having enough time.
The external stuff.
Yeah, but also the internal stuff. Our own insecurities, maybe a tendency towards pessimism, those automatic defenses we throw up.
Things that irritate us about them.
Our unspoken expectations, our fears for them, or even just our own fears of not being a good enough parent. It all gets tangled up.
It's quite sobering thinking how much of our own baggage can interfere.
It is. But here's where Perry offers a really hopeful idea. She talks about us being links in a multi-generational chain.
Okay.
But, and this is key, we have the power to reshape our link. We can consciously decide what positive things from our own upbringing we want to keep.
And what unhelpful patterns we want to consciously leave behind.
Exactly. It's about stopping the automatic transmission of stuff that didn't serve us well. Breaking cycles.
That feels really empowering.
It is. And Perry argues that actually reflecting on our own childhood discomfort, those times we felt unseen, misunderstood, maybe unloved, isn't about wallowing. It's necessary.
Necessary.
Because understanding our own emotional history, our vulnerabilities, helps us become more aware, more mindful. It helps us catch ourselves before we unconsciously repeat those old patterns with our own kids.
Okay, so we become more aware of the past, but, life happens, we mess up, things go wrong in the relationship sometimes. What then?
Right, and this leads to a really crucial concept in the book, rupture and repair.
Rupture and repair. Okay.
Perry basically says that misunderstandings, wrong assumptions, hurt feelings, these are totally normal, even unavoidable, in any close relationship, especially parent-child.
That's actually kind of comforting to hear. It takes the pressure off being perfect.
Totally. But here's the critical part. The repair is more important than the rupture itself. How we come back together after things go off track, that's what builds resilience and trust.
So how do we do that? How do we repair effectively?
Well, it involves understanding our own reactions better, noticing our triggers, what pushes our buttons, and then using that awareness to try and choose a more helpful response next time. And importantly, when we've messed up, offering a genuine apology.
Even if it wasn't intentional.
Especially then, maybe. Taking responsibility for the impact, even if the intent was fine. And Perry says a verbal apology, even much later, can still be really powerful.
She shares a story about that, doesn't she? Tay and Emily.
Yes. Tay, the therapist, was distracted by her phone while her daughter Emily was trying something on a climbing frame. Emily felt ignored, unimportant.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. But later, Tay realized what had happened, put the phone away, and really focused on Emily, offering encouragement. You could apparently see the relief wash over Emily. The connection was repaired.
It really shows how deeply kids feel those moments of disconnect.
It does. And she contrasts that with another example, Mark, who dismissed his childhood as normal, even though his dad was emotionally distant.
How's that relate?
It shows how we can unconsciously bury or avoid past pain. And if we haven't dealt with it, we risk, without meaning to, repeating similar patterns, like emotional distance with our own kids.
So we really need to process our own stuff to be fully present for them.
That seems to be a core message. Now, thinking beyond just fixing things when they go wrong, what about building that positive connection day to day?
Perry really emphasizes just being comfortable with your child, creating that feeling of safety, acceptance, making them feel truly wanted in your space.
And it's not just about saying, I love you, is it?
No, she stresses the nonverbals. Your warmth, physical touch, just your general goodwill towards them, and respect.
Respect for what specifically? Respect for their feelings, even if they seem irrational to you. Respect for them as a person, their opinions, their way of seeing the world. Actions speak louder than words here.
And she makes a point about showing love when they're awake,
Right.
right? Not just gazing at them when they're asleep and peaceful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those moments of connection when they're actually there and interacting are crucial for building that bond.
She also talks about that feeling, and I think a lot of parents feel this, of constantly wanting a break from the kids.
And she suggests that if that feeling is really persistent and maybe negatively charged, it might be less about the child themselves and more about the difficult feelings they stir up in us.
Back to those triggers from our past again.
Potentially. So she advises looking back at our own childhood with compassion, trying to understand what our unmet needs might have been. It can foster empathy for our kids. Of course, breaks are vital for parents, but if the feeling is constant escape, it's worth exploring.
Empathy seems key. Understanding their perspective, especially when their behavior is driving you crazy.
Exactly. It keeps circling back to knowing ourselves to know our children better, which brings us back to that inner critic.
Right, that negative voice. How does Perry suggest we handle that?
She really digs into how damaging that internal negativity can be, not just for us, but because we tend to often unconsciously pass it on.
Like we're narrating their lives with our own self-doubt.
Kind of, yeah. So the first, most powerful step is just noticing it, becoming aware when that critical voice pipes up.
Just the awareness gives you some distance.
It gives you a choice about whether you buy into what it's saying. She shares some practical strategies from someone named Elaine.
Oh yeah, what were those again?
First, just recognize the voice. Oh, there's my inner critic. Second, don't argue with it. Treat it like, maybe, an annoying colleague. Okay, you're entitled to your opinion, but don't engage.
Don't give it power by fighting it.
Exactly. Third, Elaine deliberately did things the critic said she couldn't to prove it wrong and build real confidence. And fourth, always being mindful of not passing it on to her kids. That was a big motivator.
Those are really concrete. Now, Perry also talks about judgment in parenting. The fear of getting it wrong.
Yes, and how damaging that can be. The fear of admitting mistakes, often tied to the shame of feeling like a bad parent.
That label is so loaded.
It really is. And that shame can actually stop us from doing the very thing we need to do, acknowledge the mistake, and repair the connection.
So what's the alternative to good parent, bad parent?
Perry suggests dropping those labels entirely, for us and for our kids. She makes a provocative point. Maybe a parent who's a bit grumpy but authentic is better than one who's outwardly sweet but secretly resentful.
Interesting. And labeling kids.
Also unhelpful. Calling one the quiet one or the clumsy one puts them in a box. It limits their potential in our eyes, and often in theirs too.
So instead of judging or labeling,
describe what you see. Appreciate specific effort. Instead of, you're great at maths, try, I saw how hard you concentrated on those sums.
Focus on the process, not just the outcome or a fixed trait.
Exactly. Or with a drawing, instead of just, lovely picture, point out a detail. I really like the way you use the blue here. Or, look at all those details you included. It's specific, observed, and less about a general judgment.
That feels much more genuine and helpful. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Family structures. There's often a lot of societal baggage around that.
And Perry has a really reassuring message here. The actual structure, nuclear, single parent, same-sex parents, whatever, seems to have very little impact on kids' development in itself.
Really? Because you hear so much about the ideal family setup.
Yeah, but she cites UK research showing kids in single-parent families, which is over 25% there, do just as well as others, especially when you account for things like finances and parents' education. The quality of relationships matters far more than the structure.
That's incredibly important to hear. What about when parents are separated, though?
Then, she says, how the parents speak about each other is critical. Being respectful, acknowledging good points, that helps the child feel secure and avoids them internalizing negativity about one parent, which can feel like it's about them.
Makes sense. And for parents who are together, it's not always smooth sailing either.
Definitely not. Perry is very upfront about the strain kids can put on a couple's relationship. Less spontaneity, less alone time, changes in intimacy, sleep deprivation, disagreements on parenting styles, work adjustments, social life changes. The list goes on.
It's a huge life shift.
Huge. And her advice is to try and accept and work with the change rather than constantly fighting against it. Like Mark, who we mentioned, he found meaning once he stopped resisting the changes fatherhood brought. And sharing the load, obviously, is crucial.
Okay, so conflict and disagreements are pretty much inevitable in family life. How does Perry suggest navigating those constructively?
She breaks conflict down into 3 parts. Context, what it's actually about. Feelings, what everyone is experiencing emotionally. And process, how you're trying to sort it out.
Context, feelings, process.
And she really stresses focusing on the feelings, sharing yours, hearing theirs, not getting stuck in what she calls fact tennis.
Fact tennis, like batting arguments back and forth.
It's exactly where the goal becomes proving you're right, using logic, rather than actually understanding each other and finding a solution.
And when parents argue, how does that affect the kids watching?
It puts them on high alert. It feels threatening to their security. Their energy goes into watching the conflict, not exploring or playing.
So what's a better way to handle disagreements?
She advises tackling one issue at a time if possible. Don't let things pile up. And start by saying how you feel. Using I feel statements. I feel worried when. Not, you always make me worry.
Less blame, more personal experience.
Right. And taking a pause. Reflecting instead of just reacting when you feel that flash of anger. She also talks about vulnerability, being willing to show your feelings as a way to build closeness.
She mentions Gottman's research on couples too, right? The disasters versus others?
Yes. Gottman found that struggling couples, the disasters, often felt stressed, saw their partner as a threat, and got into one-upmanship. Whereas healthier couples felt calmer with each other, were warmer, and made frequent bids for connection.
Bids. Like small gestures.
Yeah, little things, seeking eye contact, sharing a thought, asking for support, and how the partner responds to those bids is crucial for strengthening the bond.
So those small moments really add up.
They really do. And Perry reminds us, again, that even if we don't mean to upset someone, our actions can still have that impact. When someone, especially our child, is upset, the key is to listen and validate their feeling. I can see you're really upset about that, without getting defensive.
Even if you don't agree with their reason for being upset.
Exactly. Their feeling is real for them. The main goal, she says, in family interactions should be trying to understand how the other person feels and showing empathy.
Which flows nicely into the next big area, understanding and managing feelings, both ours and our kids.
Perry argues that responding sensitively to all of a child's feelings, not just the nice ones, teaches them a healthy relationship with their entire emotional range. And that, she says, is the bedrock of good mental health.
So what happens if we ignore or dismiss their feelings? Like saying, don't be sad, or you're fine.
Well, the feelings don't just vanish. Perry says they go into hiding, they get suppressed, but they're still there and can cause problems down the line. Feelings need to be heard, acknowledged. Like raising your voice when you feel ignored. Feelings get louder internally if dismissed.
That's a powerful image.
It is, and she offers reassurance if you feel you've handled things badly in the past, but strongly emphasizes the vital importance going forward of acknowledging, taking seriously, and validating kids' feelings.
She even links childhood emotional experiences to adult depression, doesn't she?
Yeah, quite powerfully. Suggesting that a common root of adult depression isn't always current circumstances, but rather not learning how to be soothed as a child. Repeated emotional misattunement, where your feelings aren't met with understanding, can apparently diminish our capacity to tolerate difficult emotions later.
Wow. So the flip side is,
when parents consistently soothe children through their upsets, it builds a kind of emotional optimism. It teaches them that feelings, even painful ones, are manageable and pass, and that they are still loved regardless. This makes them less vulnerable to depression and anxiety.
that's huge. She has an exercise for listeners about their own comfort with emotions, right?
Yes, a really useful reflection. Thinking about how comfortable you are with feeling and seeing different emotions. Fear, love, anger, excitement, guilt, sadness, joy in yourself and others. She encourages viewing even negative emotions as important signals, like warning lights telling us something needs attention.
And the case study of Annis, John, and Lucas. What did that show?
It showed loving, busy parents who sort of assumed their son Lucas was fine because he wasn't overtly acting out. They missed his underlying sadness and need for connection because they were so focused on work.
Until something happened.
Right. And the turning point came when they started actively asking him about his feelings. What does that feel like? Where do you feel it? Do you know why? Simply acknowledging and validating his sadness, instead of trying to fix it or cheer him up, actually helped him feel better. They realized showing love meant prioritizing time and focused attention, not just saying the words.
Presence over just proximity again.
Exactly. And Perry stresses that guilt isn't helpful. Acknowledging mistakes and changing behavior is. She urges parents to show daily that they hold their child in mind, that they're attuned to their inner world, taking feelings seriously, encouraging expression through talk or drawing.
And she uses that Winnicott quote.
Yes, the powerful one. It is a joy to be hidden and disaster not to be found, highlighting that deep need kids have to feel truly seen and understood by us.
That really sticks with you. Okay, so how do we put this into practice? Fostering better dialogue, better observation.
Well, she shares a nice example of her own daughter, Flo, apologizing for being grumpy. It shows how when we model taking responsibility, kids learn to do it too.
Leading by example.
And another time, Flo verbalized her rising anger. I'm going to get angry soon. Which shows the value of putting feelings into words before they explode.
And that concept, felt with, not dealt with. Can you unpack that a bit?
It's about validating the feeling first, before trying to solve the problem or dismiss the emotion. The example is Dave and his daughter Nova, who was being really clingy and resistant to routine changes.
Okay.
Instead of forcing her or arguing, Dave just started acknowledging her feeling. You really like things to stay the same, don't you? Or it feels safer when you know exactly what's happening?
And that helped. Seems counterintuitive.
Apparently, yes. By feeling with her, validating her need for predictability, she gradually became more flexible. Perry compares it to steering into a skid. Acknowledging the feeling gives you more control, paradoxically.
Meeting them where they are emotionally.
Exactly. And this applies even when you disagree with their perception. If your child says, "We never go anywhere fun," and you think you do.
Your instinct is to list all the fun places you've been.
Right. But Perry suggests validating the feeling behind it. So it sounds like you're feeling a bit bored and cooped up right now. You don't have to agree with the fact to acknowledge the emotion.
And this starts really early, right? Before they can even talk properly?
Absolutely. You observe their nonverbals, face, body language, and put words to what you think they might be feeling. Oh, you look frustrated that toy isn't working. It helps them learn to label their own feelings later.
And simple things, like if they want your keys.
Instead of just distracting, acknowledge, "You're really angry, I can't let you have the keys right now." Or when you leave, acknowledge their sadness and give clear info about your return. Validate, validate, validate.
She briefly mentions pregnancy beliefs and modern research, too. What's the takeaway there?
Mainly, don't get bogged down in guilt if you feel advice came too late. Distinguish between truly toxic stress and normal life stress during pregnancy. Focus on positive expectations. She also mentions different parenting styles like facilitator or regulator, suggesting honesty about your own tendencies is helpful. And acknowledging that birth and early days aren't always the fairy tale, feeling like you're acting bonded is normal sometimes. Self-acceptance is key.
That theme of self-acceptance runs deep, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, what about the need for support for parents and those crucial early interactions?
Perry says, to parent, we need to be parented in turn, meaning we all need support, emotional and practical, ask for help. And she specifically notes that fathers need support just as much.
She shares Sheena's story about postnatal difficulties.
Yes, after a traumatic birth and separation from one twin, it highlights how vital addressing the parent's emotional needs is for bonding to happen effectively.
And those very first experiences for a baby, they really imprint, don't they?
Deeply. Babies are biologically wired to attach. Perry outlines the main attachment styles: secure, insecure, ambivalent, avoidant, dismissive, with secure being the goal, fostered by responsive care. Inconsistent or neglectful care can lead to insecure styles and negative core beliefs.
Yeah, no, but babies cry.
She calls them coercive cries, not manipulative, but a fundamental signal of need. We're biologically programmed to respond. For a baby, want equals need.
Parenthood can be lonely, too, even with a partner.
Perry talks about Julie, who felt isolated after her partner left and her parents didn't understand. Finding a support group was vital. Perry herself shares her own PND experience, emphasizing acknowledging hard feelings and finding connection with other mothers. Loneliness is a signal, like hunger.
And that early nonverbal communication.
Foundational. Body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, that's the first dialogue. She talks about mutual impact and turn-taking, contrasting it with a one-sided doing and done to dynamic. Responding to a baby's cues, their little looks and gestures, is vital. A lack of response can foster insecurity or avoidance.
She mentions diaphobia. What's that?
A discomfort with that give and take of communication. She encourages awareness, not blame, and emphasizes it's never too late to improve connection by really listening and seeing from the child's view. She shares John's story of realizing his defensiveness came from his dad and how acknowledging that helped him connect with his son.
And the experiments where mothers are unresponsive?
Yeah. Babies show distress very quickly. It underscores that need for reciprocity. A lack of response can make a baby feel like they barely exist to the caregiver. It's profound.
Really highlights the power of just being present and responsive. Okay, let's talk about engaged observation, play, and the ever-present topic of sleep.
Perry says real listening means letting the other person actually impact you, not just waiting for your turn to talk. She also warns about parental screen time. Kids will want screens if we're always on ours. But reassuringly, past distraction can be repaired by stopping and making space now.
And babies are ready for dialogue from the start.
Yes, innately. They learn communication through family interactions. Each family develops a unique language through observation and turn-taking. Perry shares her surprise at the deep connection with her baby Ned, learning his nonverbal cues.
She cautions against the idea of a good, low-impact baby.
Right. Because that can lead to a child over-adapting, losing touch with their own needs and self. Let the baby impact you, learn their signals, treat them with respect, tell them what's happening, pause for them to take it, and that back and forth is key.
What about clinginess? We touched on it, but how does it relate to independence?
Paradoxically, allowing them to be clingy, letting them separate at their own pace, builds the security they need to become independent later. Forcing it can backfire. Meet their relational needs at each stage.
And if those early years feel, well, a bit boring sometimes.
Shift perspective. Get curious about the baby's world. Don't just see it as tasks. Engage with their experience.
Okay, sleep. The big one.
Huge. Perry points out nighttime is a big chunk of a baby's life. Consistent feelings of being unheard or unmet can shape their mood. She distinguishes tolerable stress, crying but being comforted, from toxic stress, crying alone for long periods, which can affect brain development. Occasional sleeping through cries isn't catastrophic, but nightly ignoring is different.
She debunks sleeping through the night, too.
Yeah, explains normal sleep cycles. A baby sensing a caregiver nearby is less likely to fully wake. She's cautious about sleep training methods that feel like conditioning rather than relating, potentially teaching despair around needing others.
So what does she suggest instead?
She used sleep nudging, Gentle, gradual separation. The principle is helping, not rescuing. Nudge them to the edge of their comfort zone, but trust their pace. The Frey Opping Pong story illustrates this. Observe cues, don't jump in too fast, but be there.
And play. The importance of it.
Crucial. Need a safe space for play without constant no's to foster concentration and self-direction. And parents need to engage in their free play, led by the child, even if it's not your thing. Investing time early often leads to more independent play later. Refusing to play can send hurtful messages.
And playing with different ages.
Really beneficial for social skills, leadership, support. She worries structured activities might limit this.
Okay, wrapping up with a final big theme. Understanding behavior as communication.
Right. Perry argues that when those supportive relationship foundations are there, better behavior tends to follow. It starts with considering feelings, not dismissing actions.
And ditching good and bad behavior labels.
Yeah, she prefers convenient and inconvenient, because often inconvenient behavior isn't deliberate naughtiness, it's communication.
Communicating what?
Unmet needs, trying to connect, seeking attention, even negative attention is better than none. We need to look behind the behavior at the emotion and circumstances. Patience and acceptance help more than anger, even with kids who are naturally harder to soothe.
She pushes back against blaming lax parenting solely.
Yes. It's more about the child's developmental pace for things like frustration, tolerance, flexibility, problem solving, sticker charts and bribes. She's not a fan. They focus on judgment, not building internal skills like empathy.
The Gina and Aof story about the late nursery pickup really showed this, didn't it?
Perfectly. Ao's meltdown wasn't just being naughty. It was feeling rushed, disconnected, needing explanation, routine disrupted. Perry's empathy shows us how to think from the child's view. No might mean slow down or I need connection.
So it's about decoding the behavior.
Exactly. Offer alternatives, like John suggesting his son ask for a cuddle differently. Try to name the feeling underneath the tantrum. Oh dear, poor you. Staying connected so they don't feel alone in their distress. Reflect. Don't just react. Don't take it personally.
And reasoning with a toddler mid-tantrum.
Usually pointless. Feeling with them is more effective. Remember, it's co-created. Let go of needing to be right. Model cooperation.
The Bella and Felix story about clinginess relating to her past illness was powerful too.
Yeah, it showed how our own buried feelings can make us insensitive to our kids. We need empathy for ourselves too. She also touches on honesty, telling kids about hard things age-appropriately, rather than secrets they sense anyway, and looking for feelings behind fantasy or lies.
Even with teenage lying.
Yeah, her own experience with Flo showed listening to the reason, wanting to do something forbidden, kept communication open, even when finding out about more serious stuff later. Remember, being a teen, needing privacy.
So the goal is always keeping communication open.
Yes. By being a safe person to talk to, accepting feelings, brainstorming solutions. Look for reasons behind behavior, not just punish, because punishment often just makes kids better liars, as research shows. Judgment closes doors.
What about setting boundaries firmly?
Mean what you say. Avoid empty threats. Follow through, but be sympathetic to their frustration while holding the line. State your feelings and wants. I want my lunch now, rather than getting into logic battles.
And for bigger issues, or with teens?
Use that three-step problem solving. Define the problem, find the feelings, brainstorm solutions together. With teen boundaries, frame it around your feelings readiness. I'm not ready for you to, not their character. Remember, their brains are still developing. Expect some risk-taking. Offer empathy and support. Listen without judgment. Validate their experience. It keeps connection strong.
And if things break down?
Honest reflection. Ask them what's needed to mend it. Remember, we're not always right just because we're older.
So what's the ultimate aim of all this?
To provide a secure base. Emotionally, practically. So even if they get lost later in life, they have this safe harbor inside themselves, built through their relationship with you, your interest, your positive regard that lasts a lifetime. She ends with that sad anecdote about the competitive grandmother, a reminder to avoid those unhelpful patterns, even with adult kids.
Wow. So back to that comedian's joke, dressing, feeding, washing, bed. Maybe those tasks get easier if we focus on the relationship first.
That seems to be Perry's core message. Address your own past blocks. Understand and validate feelings, theirs and yours. Connect through dialogue. Really observe. Help without always rescuing. And remember, all behavior is communication.
It's definitely a journey, not a destination. We really hope listeners keep exploring these ideas, maybe see how they might fit into their own lives.
Yeah. And maybe for a final thought, Reflect on just one small thing you could try differently in your next interaction with your child. Maybe listen a bit longer. Validate a feeling you might usually dismiss. Just one small shift towards connection over correction today. What might that look like for you? Definitely worth exploring these ideas more, maybe even checking out the book itself. Thanks for digging into this with us.